Today, the Nobel Peace Prize for 2025 is bestowed upon a brave and committed champion of peace, a woman described by the Norwegian Nobel Committee as one who keeps the flame of democracy burning amid a growing darkness. The recipient is María Corina Machado, honored for her tireless efforts in promoting democratic rights in Venezuela and leading her country toward a just and peaceful transition from dictatorship to democracy. In its announcement, the committee stated she is receiving the Nobel Peace Prize for her tireless work promoting democratic rights for the people of Venezuela and for her struggle to achieve a just and peaceful transition from dictatorship to democracy. That recognition underscores her role as a unifier within an opposition once riven by divisions, one that rallied behind the demand for free elections and representative government. From a country that once promised relative democracy and prosperity, Venezuela has descended into a harsh authoritarianism. Basic living conditions have collapsed as the few at the top amass wealth. The state's coercive machinery now works against its own citizens. Millions have fled the country. The opposition is suffocated through electoral manipulation, legal prosecutions, imprisonments, and suppression of dissent. Under these conditions, political activity is fraught with danger. Machado, as founder of Sumate, an organization oriented to democratic development, took on the system more than 2 decades ago. Her approach was consistently framed in contrast to violence. As she once put it, it was a choice of ballots over bullets. Over the years, she has campaigned for an independent judiciary, human rights, and popular representation. She has dedicated her life to the freedom of the Venezuelan people. When the 2024 presidential election approached, Machado attempted to run. The regime blocked her candidacy. In response, she threw support behind Edmundo González Urrutia, the candidate from a different party aligned with the unified opposition. Hundreds of thousands of volunteers, spanning multiple political factions, were trained as election observers. Despite the threats of harassment, arrest, and torture, these citizens stood guard at polling stations, documented results, and strove to ensure transparency before ballots could be discarded or falsified. The opposition's efforts were bold, peaceful, and inventive. The leaders publicly released vote counts collected from across electoral districts, which indicated that their alliance had won by a clear margin. However, the regime refused to accept defeat and clung to power. The Nobel Committee's statement affirmed that democracy is a precondition for lasting peace. Yet the current global climate shows democracy under siege. Authoritarian regimes are resurfacing, rule of law is misused, media are silenced, critics jailed, and societies increasingly militarized. Even as more elections occur, fewer qualify as free and fair in today's world. Over its history, the Norwegian Nobel Committee has honored those who stood up to repression, activists who carried hope in prison walls, in public squares, and through peaceful defiance. In the past year, Machado has been forced to live clandestinely, facing serious threats to her life, yet remained in Venezuela. As the committee put it, when authoritarians seize power, it is crucial to recognize courageous defenders of freedom who rise and resist. They held that democracy depends on citizens who refuse to stay silent, who dare to step forward despite grave risk, and who remind us that freedom must never be taken for granted, but must always be defended with words, with courage, and with determination. Machado exemplifies the criteria set forth in Alfred Nobel's will. She has brought Venezuela's opposition together, resisted militarization, and remained unwavering in her support for a peaceful transition to democracy. Venezuela's slide from a mixed democracy to a crisis-ridden authoritarian state has made its internal politics especially fraught. Under Nicolás Maduro's leadership, the government has consolidated control over key institutions, media, security, judiciary, making dissent dangerous and opposition weakening. Yet from this soil of repression, Machado emerged not just as a dissident, but as a leader. Her coalition building and insistence on civility and order won her a place as the unifying figure in a fractured opposition landscape. By 2023, this ascent led to tensions with the regime. The Venezuelan government barred her from running in the 2024 election, citing administrative and judicial pretexts. Many viewed these as politically motivated actions designed to neutralize popular challengers. Once Machado was sidelined, she threw her weight behind Edmundo González Urrutia, a veteran diplomat and opposition figure. The strategy represented a new phase, a unified opposition front rallying behind a candidate unburdened by legal disqualifications. González, then in his mid-70s, brought institutional credibility and diplomatic experience, yet his candidacy was always fraught. The regime controlled the election architecture and the environment was stacked against dissent. The July 2024 contest was contentious from the outset. With most media and institutions under regime sway, the playing field was drastically tilted. Independent observers and organizations repeatedly warned of irregularities. After the election, the opposition claimed victory using their internal tallies, but the regime declared Maduro the winner. The aftermath was swift and repressive. González fled to Spain amid arrest warrants and threats. Meanwhile, the authorities declared him wanted and offered a $100,000 reward for his capture. The international community split. The US recognized González as the rightful president-elect. Several Latin American states and the European Parliament followed suit. But Maduro retained control over Venezuela's territory, government machinery, and coercive apparatus. Without recognition from key allies such as Russia and China and lacking institutional access, González's claim remained symbolic more than functional. In effect, the Venezuelan crisis entered a new phase, a standoff between a regime that holds power and an opposition that commands moral legitimacy in some quarters but lacks control. Meanwhile, domestic repression intensified. Machado, though deeply threatened, remained in hiding inside Venezuela. Her decision to stay, rather than flee, became a potent symbol of resistance. Reports also confirmed that some of her closest aides were arrested, exiled, or pressured. The Nobel citation emphasized not just Machado's individual courage, but the broader logic of collective resistance. In the committee's words, democracy is a precondition for lasting peace. And in this moment, where democracy globally is contested, they warned that more and more authoritarian regimes are challenging norms and resorting to violence. The Venezuelan case, they said, is a microcosm of a world in retreat from democratic governance. The decision to award Machado the Nobel Peace Prize carries weight beyond her personal recognition. It signals the global community's acknowledgement of the Venezuelan struggle as part of a larger battle over democratic norms and rights. Her award joins a lineage of laureates who resisted tyranny, from Nelson Mandela to Aung San Suu Kyi. The Nobel Committee regarded her as fulfilling key criteria in Alfred Nobel's will, uniting opposition forces, resisting militarism, standing firm for a peaceful transition. The prize bolsters visibility for Venezuela's democratic movement and reinforces international pressure on the Maduro regime. It comes at a moment when the opposition hopes to build momentum. The award may embolden dissidents, challenge regime narratives, and offer a lifeline to morale. But for the regime, it is also a provocation, one more external validation of dissent. For Machado, the recognition is profoundly symbolic, a vindication for her struggle, a tribute to Venezuelans suffering under repression, and a spotlight on the idea that democratic transitions, while prolonged and contested, are not futile. Yet this victory is fragile. Maduro's grip on state institutions is tight. The regime's coercive capabilities remain intact. And while international recognition strengthens moral legitimacy, it does little to shift power structures on the ground without broad defections or internal fractures. Still, the Nobel Prize gives the opposition, and Machado in particular, a new platform. It may influence foreign actors, raise diplomatic stakes, and sustain the pressure on Caracas to allow freer political space. She is receiving the Nobel Peace Prize for her tireless work promoting democratic rights for the people of Venezuela and for her struggle to achieve a just and peaceful transition from dictatorship to democracy, a choice of ballots over bullets. When authoritarians seize power, it is crucial to recognize courageous defenders of freedom who rise and resist. Democracy depends on people who refuse to stay silent, who dare to step forward despite grave risk, and who remind us that freedom must never be taken for granted, but must always be defended with words, with courage, and with determination. These lines, preserved from the original speech, carry both moral force and rhetorical clarity. They serve as anchors around which the rest of the narrative evolves. The road ahead remains steep and uncertain. Will Maduro's regime respond by further crackdown or by token concessions? Can the opposition transform international legitimacy into internal pressure or institutional gains? Will segments of the military or ruling elite face incentives to defect, or will they remain loyal, secure under external patronage? How far can global leverage, sanctions, diplomatic backlash shift the internal balance? And crucially, can Venezuela rebuild democratic foundations when so much has been eroded? Whatever unfolds, María Corina Machado's Nobel accolade marks a moment of moral clarity in a dark political landscape. For many Venezuelans, it is a message of hope that within repression, courage still matters, that resistance still counts, that democracy, however battered, still holds a claim on the future. In announcing her as this year's laureate, the Nobel Committee underscored the stakes. It is more important than ever to defend this common ground. For Venezuela and for many nations watching, the idea is not nostalgia. It is a warning, a call, and a reminder that peace without democracy is unstable, and democracy without defenders is fragile.